Okay. So before the break, we were talking about a lot of the different things that, we could try to do to make the brain better. And I was realizing that the name of your book, The Neurogenesis, has another part called Diet and Lifestyle. So if that's part of what you're talking about with neurogenesis, let's dive in a little bit to diet and lifestyle and how that can affect the brain or improve the brain's function. So, it's part of the holistic approach. I was kind of shocked by some of the things I was reading in the book about diet. So let's start with diet. And what are some of the key things that we can do to improve our brain function based on what we eat and based on what we maybe shouldn't eat?
Okay, good. Yeah, that's right. It's a two-pronged strategy. We want to eat those things, more of those things that are really good for the brain, that are neurohealthy and stimulate neurogenesis.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to try to avoid or minimize those things that slow down neurogenesis and are toxic to the brain. So to build a better brain, we need good building materials, right? If you're building a high-end house, you use high quality materials.
Roger's building a house right now. That's perfect.
Okay. Yeah, you don't use rotting lumber or high quality wood. It's the same with the brain. So the brain is made up of about 2/3 fat. And one thing we want is lots of good, healthy fats. And healthy fats are non-oxidized fats. And saturated fats, monosaturated fats, and certain kinds of polyunsaturated fatty acids. So let me break this down into English. So one unhealthy form of fat are oxidized fats. Oxidized fats come from heating or from exposure to oxygen. So cooking in vegetable oil, for example, oxidizes the food, oxidizes the fats. And when we eat that kind of oxidized fats, when it gets into our bloodstream, those oxidized fats oxidize the cholesterol in our bloodstream. And that oxidized cholesterol makes for hardening of the arteries, it makes for heart disease, and it really radically increases inflammation. And inflammation both slows down neurogenesis to a crawl, and it also chews up the inside of our blood vessels. Inflammation is one of the worst things for the brain. It's one of the real poisons for the brain. So eating, for example, fried foods, it's one of the worst things you can do for your brain. Neurogenesis stops in its tracks. They did this one study looking at people who ate fish 1 to 3 times a week. And they found that these people had 16% more gray matter, more neurons in the higher brain centers of the brain, unless they ate fried fish, in which case there was no difference between them and normal people. So what we want is a lot of good, healthy fats. So healthy fats are things like avocados, nuts, grass-fed beef, pastured chicken, pastured eggs. Pastured eggs are one of the best things for the brain. Just don't overcook them. Pastured dairy, like whole milk yogurt from pastured cows, or cheese. Wild-caught fish. These things are great building blocks for the brain. And we want to stay away from overcooking. And so we don't want to cook with vegetable oil. We want to cook with coconut oil, with saturated fats that don't oxidize with heat. So coconut oil or butter, or even better, ghee, clarified butter, or lard or tallow. These things are great for cooking with. We don't even want to cook with olive oil unless it's at very low temperature. Olive oil is best eaten on salads, best eaten cold. We don't want to cook with vegetable oil. We want saturated fats. And one of the best type of fats to eat are omega-3 fatty acids. So we talked about this before in terms of being an antidepressant. Our brain starts producing new brain cells at a high rate when we have a good amount of omega-3 fatty acids. So some people can get this just through eating a lot of wild-caught salmon, but most people need to do some kind of supplement. And most people could do 3, 4, 5 grams a day of an omega-3 supplement. And what we want is a supplement that is high in DHA and which has no mercury.
Mm-hmm.
So mercury concentrates in fish, and the higher up the food chain of fish, the more mercury. So many omega-3 capsules have a lot of mercury in them. And mercury is one of the most potent neurotoxins known. But if you get a fish oil capsule that is molecularly distilled, then it won't have any mercury in it. And we also want a fish oil capsule that is high in DHA. So some capsules are very low in DHA. DHA is the one we want. Again, 2/3 of the brain is fat, and of that, 1/3 of it is DHA. We need lots of good, high-quality fats. We need lots of cooked and fresh vegetables. And we also need low sugar. Low sugar diet.
No more M&Ms.
I'm sorry.
I had some last night, and I was like, and it's all Kathleen's fault, by the way.
No, but I had Skittles because of the football game.
Right.
Well, it turns out a high sugar diet will cut your rate of neurogenesis in 2.
Mm.
That's pretty astonishing. When you think about the average American diet of like school kids, right? They start off with sugar frosted flakes and orange juice. It's like, it's high sugar and bad fats. It's the opposite of what we want. You know, we've been told by the government for the past 20 or 30 years to eat a low-fat diet and a high carbohydrate diet, high complex carbohydrate diet. And it turns out that's the exact wrong diet to eat for brain health and even for cardiovascular health. So current nutrition science is pretty clear now that a high carbohydrate diet is what is leading to this obesity epidemic and to this diabetes epidemic and heart disease epidemic as well, right? 75% of American men are now overweight or obese, and 2/3 of American women are. And it's become very clear that a high carbohydrate, low fat diet is responsible for that, because those calories that come in the form of carbohydrate get converted to sugar and stored as fat. You know, it seems counterintuitive, but a high-fat diet doesn't make you fat. It's a low-fat diet that makes people fat.
Doesn't this just like drive people crazy? Because, I mean, first of all, going just to the vegetable oil, I mean, I changed everything that I cook in to vegetable oil because presumably that was better.
Yes.
And then I just switched to olive oil because even that was better. And here I have coconut oil sitting in my pantry that I could be using. So it's just,
Right.
I mean, it's just one thing, oil. I mean, there's so many different things. I think you mentioned something in the book about about cholesterol and, you know, the drugs that we use for cholesterol. Let me see. Maybe I'll just throw that to you. Talk to us about cholesterol, because you said that's kind of wrong too.
That's right. So this early research that all these government recommendations were based on failed to distinguish between healthy fats and unhealthy fats, between oxidized cholesterol and unoxidized cholesterol. And it made all fats bad. And the new nutrition science says, wait, actually, fats are what human beings lived on mostly for the past several 100,000 years. That's what our body is used to metabolizing. And so this failure to distinguish between good fats and bad fats, or healthy fats and unhealthy fats, has led to all fats being bad. And then some good fats led in. Well, now it's become clear. And cholesterol is a good example. We need cholesterol. If we don't get enough of it, the body will manufacture it. And we need it for good brain function. We need it for memory. And so right now, something like between a quarter and a third of the population is taking statins to reduce their cholesterol. And these statins, in lowering the cholesterol in the blood, are also causing memory problems in many, many people. And some people think that we are on the verge of a tsunami of Alzheimer's, and that this lowered cholesterol is part of what's responsible for this increase in Alzheimer's. And the other part of this increase in Alzheimer's comes from the high carbohydrate part of this dietary recommendation. The high carbohydrate diet produces insulin resistance. And insulin resistance means that since all carbohydrate gets converted to sugar eventually in your body, and you need insulin to process sugar, with a high amount of carbohydrate and sugar in our diet, eventually our cells make fewer and fewer insulin receptors. So we have higher and higher rates of insulin in our body, which is damaging, and we have higher and higher rates of blood sugar, of blood glucose, which is also very damaging to the body. It produces advanced glycation end products, or known as AGEs, that cross-links proteins so they don't work together. So when you look at like the browning of a chicken on our roaster, that is due to advanced glycation end products. That's what happens to our skin. That's what happens to our brain. So you can trace cognitive decline, and you can trace a person's elevated blood sugar levels, and they go just neck and neck.
Yikes.
People are calling Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes. Alzheimer's also is due to a dysregulation of glucose metabolism in the body. So one of the best things we can do in terms of diet is, first of all, look to see, do we have some sort of insulin resistance? Something like close to 80% of the American population now is believed to have some degree of insulin resistance. There's a simple blood test, which when you get your yearly physical, you can request of your physician, called the hemoglobin A1C. That tells you what your blood sugar is over the last 3 months. It's a snapshot of it. And most everybody has an elevated A1C. What that means is we are all cognitively declining much faster than we should be. So if your A1C is at all elevated, at all above baseline, it would behoove you to reduce your carbohydrates and try to undo this insulin resistance, to try to get your insulin levels back to normal levels, to get your glucose levels back to normal.
And is that possible?
That is indeed possible.
Nice.
When we cut down on our carbohydrates and we increase healthy fats. And we also seem to return to our natural weight at that point. It's like the pounds just melt off without the extra carbohydrates. You don't have to try to diet or use willpower in any way. It just happens.
You know, it's interesting. I think what I've come to learn is I think sugar is the worst culprit of all.
Yes.
And it's amazing when you go to the grocery store, and I think, Janet, you've heard me say this before, the time that I went and bought a jar of Planters peanuts, and I took it out to the truck, and I looked at the label, and it had sugar in it. It's like...
They're peanuts. Why do you have sugar in them?
It's like, go to the grocery store and just like randomly pick up things. It's like, I would imagine 99% of the things in a grocery store have sugar in it. But, you know, the other, you know, I guess I'm a human experiment or something, because I was on statins for a while too. I was part of a study. I was actually part of a study in the East Bay near San Francisco, and for, I don't know, 8 or 9 months. And then I moved and I just stopped doing it. But what I discovered was over time is diet. Like I started consuming spirulina like every day, mixed with like a green drink. Mm-hmm. And because one of my levels of cholesterol is really high, but all of the my blood pressure and all of the other factors they're non-factors really. But also in doing that, exercising and that spirulina drink every day for like 6 or 8 months, I went and had my cholesterol checked, and it went down on it basically by just doing that with no statin drugs. Yeah. So and also I think too, I wanted to add, because I'm just like discovering this, how many people as we grew up cooked with Teflon pans and aluminum pans. And if you do the research on Teflon and the chemicals that were leached into their food, and the companies knew it, but they didn't say anything about it, it's basically criminal, some of this stuff. Yeah. Sorry, Janet.
Yeah, and aluminum also, as you're saying, aluminum is also implicated.
Aluminum cans, right? How many people?
With an acid in them.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's, anyway.
And aluminum is also a preservative in vaccines. And that's also a major source of aluminum toxicity is through vaccines.
Most deodorants have aluminum in them.
Yeah.
I find it interesting in listening to you that most of these things that you're talking about are really criminal, because these companies, the big pharmaceuticals, I don't know if you heard today, yesterday a company in Canada bought the patents and the rights to some drug that was like $13 a pill, and overnight they raised the price to $750.
What?
Yeah, and another drug, I think it was for Hep C.
Yeah.
Same thing. They raised the rate 5,000%. The price 5,000%. It's like, how can you justify those kind of things? And at the same time, they're basically destroying your brain cells.
It is astonishing what is happening. It really is astonishing. And what's even more astonishing is to realize so many of these diseases are lifestyle diseases. Mm-hmm. It's not necessary to get sick like this. But it's only now that this information is really coming out. Everybody has just kind of stumbled into this innocently without even realizing it. So I think the sooner information like this can get out to everybody, it's very empowering to realize that actually I can take a lot of control over my health. And even cholesterol levels. Cholesterol levels by themselves are no longer seen as that important among many people, although most physicians are still behind the curve on this. It's the kind of cholesterol. It's the type of LDL cholesterol that you have. Do you have the big fluffy kind, which is fine, or do you have the very low density kind, which is not so fine? So it's really the type of LDL that you have that's more important than the actual cholesterol numbers themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Oh, go ahead, Roger.
No, I think that listening to you talk earlier about the foods that we should eat and all of that, I remember a couple of years ago, I thought I had a cavity and it turned out I didn't, but I was on this kick anyway about healing my own teeth, right? Mm-hmm. It's like everything that we're taught that is good for us that we should consume is actually the opposite, right? So like I'm doing research on how to heal your teeth. Raw cheese, raw milk, no pasteurization at all, right?
But
butter.
Tell you that raw milk is bad for you.
Oh yeah, right. It's like, wait a minute. So, and I'm listening to you talk, Brant, and it's like the same thing. It's like all of these things we've been told. It's like maybe we should just do the opposite.
Yeah, it's very hard to sort out what's a myth and what's not. It's like, it's very easy to just sort of throw up your hands and say, I don't know what's going on, but there is good information, and it just requires discernment and a certain amount of just learning about this.
Intuition,
Absolutely.
I think, on your own body as well, tuning in and seeing, what does my body require?
That's right.
A few minutes ago, I was going to say that there was a point in your book that you said about the number of hours between meals, and how that in some cases, you didn't call it starvation. What did you call it?
Intermittent fasting.
Fasting, yes. How it has a benefit to our brains. Talk a little bit about that, because I know right now there's this big kick about 5 and 6 meals a day, little meals,
Yeah.
spaced out, that is being more supportive to your body, when this would seem to differ from what you say here in the book.
That's right. So a lot of little teeny meals from this perspective is, again, the opposite of what we need to do. So when you don't eat, when your body goes into a fasting state, after about 12 hours, it uses up all the glycogen stores in your body. And you then begin to convert your fat stores into energy. And the body begins to repair itself in a healing state. So one of the best things you can do to bring down your blood sugar, to lose weight, and to just increase your overall level of health is to wait at least 12 hours, and even better, 14 or 15 hours between dinner and breakfast or lunch. So in this Buck Foundation study that I mentioned, one of the things they had the seniors do is wait at least 12 to 14 hours between dinner and breakfast the next day. That was an important part of getting their body into this fasting state, where they begin to actually metabolize the fat, where they become what's called fat adapted, where you can actually learn to burn fat. Most people are not fat adapted, and when they don't eat, they begin to feel all panicky. They begin to feel freaked out, anxious, stressed out, and that's a sign that their body is just used to burning carbohydrates and glucose.
Oh.
Stay in that. After a while, your body learns to burn the fat, and then when you don't eat, you don't experience anything. You're just as calm as ever. It's fine. Your body learns to actually use and clean out the fat that's there.
Now, how does that fly in the face of the wisdom that, at least through my lifetime, I've heard that if you starve your body, that the next time you eat, it starts converting that to fat. What do they call it? A starvation sort of mode. So that in the times of plenty, your body's storing fat for the times of lean food reserves.
Yeah. Well, so we're not talking about actually reducing the number of calories. We're talking about eating the same number of calories, but just spacing out when you eat it. So you're not starving. You're just postponing breakfast. If you just don't eat after 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, and then don't eat until 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock the next morning, that fasting state, your body begins to renew itself and heal itself, and it begins to kind of reset your insulin, your glucose metabolism as well.
Okay. Now, that's kind of funny, because as I was growing up, I was never a breakfast eater. I certainly didn't want to get up and eat at 7:30 in the morning and then go to school. My natural rhythm was more like 10 or 11 o'clock, which gives us that longer time. But that's not how, we're sort of raised to eat.
That's right.
Yeah, but I thought it was interesting that in our evolution as humans, that's kind of how things were for us. I mean, our first meal of the day didn't come at 8 o'clock because we could reach into a cabinet and pull out the cereal. It was when I went to the river and maybe you did some fishing and then came and prepared my breakfast.
That's right. We didn't have food available to us 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to go through periods of not eating, and the body repaired itself. Our body's actually quite well adapted to periods of not eating and actually thrives on that. It's this continuous eating that is part of this obesity epidemic, part of the heart disease epidemic, part of this whole chronic illness and early Alzheimer's epidemic, all this. These are diseases of civilization and not eating well. Yeah.
It's almost like the dawn of grocery stores became our demise.
Yeah.
In many ways, yes.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. I haven't experienced this in a really, really long time. And I mentioned earlier that I had M&Ms last night, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, Janet, you can probably attest to this, because earlier today, all of a sudden, we go in this place for lunch, and I want to like rip everybody's heads off. And I noticed that my blood sugar just like went through the floor, and I haven't experienced that in a really, really, really long time. But and then I thought about it. It's like, yeah, I had those M&Ms, and it's that sugar, right? Mm-hmm. But I also, the other thing I was noticing in the restaurant, and it flashed back to when I was in Europe earlier this year, is I'm watching these guys in the restaurant eat that are hugely overweight. And they have sandwiches that are like this thick, and they're eating the whole thing. It's like in Europe, the meals are smaller. You don't eat as much. We eat so much here. It's like if they bring a whole plate of food out, you just sit there and eat it till you're done. So I think that is, you know, there's just, it's like there's so many different layers to this, right?
Yeah.
Even the thing about people, and I know that I've met people, and Brant, I'm sure in your line of work, the amount of people that eat to deal with emotional issues as well. So, I mean, there's a lot of different, and then you eat the wrong things. Right.
That's right. Most eating is emotional eating. It's for emotion regulation, to try to soothe ourselves or calm ourselves. And so learning new ways of emotion regulation is also helpful. And it turns out that eating a high good fat diet is actually very good in terms of emotional regulation as well. Right. When we eat sugar and high carbs, that's not such there's a temporary sort of sugar rush, and then a kind of calming down when the insulin comes and takes us over. Then we fall asleep and nod out, but then it just sort of starts the cycle all over again.
Mm-hmm.
See, I want to be a breatharian. I've decided.
Just live on breath.
Yeah. That and water and beer.
I don't even know what to say to that.
Nothing.
I found it was interesting, too, that you mentioned in the book that grass-fed meats and free-range chicken or eggs that are, from, what is the reason for that?
Okay, good. So, we talked about omega-3 fatty acids. There's also omega-6 fatty acids. Mm-hmm. And those are also essential. We need them from our diet. And what those do is they help the inflammatory response in our body. And we need to have an inflammatory response to fight infections or to fight like a wound that's healing. Mm-hmm. It's general inflammation or chronic inflammation, which we don't want. So in the diet of most people, we have an imbalance between omega-3 and omega-6. So evolutionarily, over the past few 100,000 years, there's been like a 1-to-1 or a 1-to-2 ratio between omega-3s and omega-6s. In the modern diet, it's more like 1-to-20 or 1-to-30. It's way out of balance. And that produces this inflammatory response in the body, which is bad for the brain, bad for the heart, bad for everything. It just chews up the inside of our blood vessels. So it turns out that regular commercial beef have a ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 of 1 to about 5. I think it's 4.85. Whereas grass-fed beef has a ratio that's 1 to 1.85. Closer to this 1-to-2. So grass-fed beef is just exactly what we need. And commercial beef is very difficult for the body and a challenge for the body, and gets these inflammatory cytokines going.
And it's because of what they're feeding the cattle?
Yes, exactly.
Corn and other
The hormones.
Hormones.
And also GMO corn, which has this glyphosate in it. And that also is a big antibiotic. It kills the gut microbes, both in the beef and in the people that eat the beef. And so it also affects our gut health as well, our intestinal flora as well.
It sounds like we're being systematically killed off, doesn't it?
It does. Like so many of these diseases are diseases of this kind of lifestyle. You know, it's the same with pastured chicken.
Yeah.
And with pasture-raised pork, with pigs. And the same with farmed fish. It's like we want wild-caught fish because, again, the fatty acid profile is wonderful versus farm-raised fish, which also is contaminated with mercury and PCBs and all this other stuff.
So we have to learn to be really wise about what we're putting in our body.
That's right. That's right.
And maybe listening to conventional wisdom isn't so good for us.
Yeah, do your homework here. That's right.
So, Brant, give us an idea of where people can find more information out about this. Your website, where can they get the book, and then what would you like to leave us with today as your final thoughts?
Okay. So the book is available on Amazon. It's the Neurogenesis Diet and Lifestyle. You can also order it from any bookstore. And if you'd like to read the first chapter, that's on the book's website, which is neurogenesisdiet.com, one word. And you can also get it through my website, which is brantcortright.com. And I guess if there's one thing I'd like to leave the viewers with, it would simply be that diet is hugely important, but it goes as part of a whole lifestyle. That we also need to be stimulating our brains optimally, emotionally, cognitively, and spiritually. Mm-hmm. It's this whole body, heart, mind, spirit that will produce the most powerful increase in neurogenesis and brain health.
That even feels good when you say it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it makes sense. That's who we are.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much, Brant. It's been a wonderful talk. I really do want to have you come back and talk to us more so we can get more. I really think we could make an entire show around the holistic ways that we could be living based on lifestyle, body, mind, spirit, and the emotions. So I guess to our listeners, tune in later. We'll have Brant back on and we'll get deeper into some of these things. We didn't talk about this today, but exercise also plays a role here, and moving the physical body. So maybe we can take up some of those things then as well.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for helping spread the word about neurogenesis.
Yeah, you're most welcome. And thank you for writing this book.
Yeah, it's going to be hugely beneficial to a lot of people. So I want to thank you for being on.
Yes.
Thank you, Janet.
Thanks, Roger.
And look forward to our next interview.
All right.
All right.
Everybody take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.